They had called them primitive, emotional, easily swayed. A species of chaotic artists and short-sighted engineers, valuable only for the novelty of their culture and the exploitable density of their home system's resources. The Galactic Union, vast and bureaucratic, saw humanity as little more than a persistent, minor nuisance on the edge of their influence, a species prone to sentimentality and inconvenient notions of rights and sovereignty. Their pleas for recognition, their warnings about expansion, were met with indulgent smiles in opulent council chambers light years away. They were told, politely at first, then with cold finality, that the galaxy had an established order, a hierarchy understood over millennia, and humanity's place was far, far down. Useful, perhaps. Interesting, occasionally. But never, ever, a peer. That arrogance was a disease, subtle and corrosive. It blinded the Union to the depth of humanity's quiet desperation, to the fierce, unyielding core that lay beneath the perceived chaos. They saw only the surface, the squabbling factions, the inefficient governance. They did not see the shared history of overcoming impossible odds, the memory burned into their collective psyche of facing existential threats and refusing to yield. So, the Union acted. It was not a war, not in their minds. It was an exercise in resource management. A strategic adjustment. The human colony on Xylos Prime was rich in rare minerals essential for Union hypercores. The humans were proving troublesome, citing old, ignored treaties, causing delays. A simple solution was devised. A demonstration was required. Not annihilation, that would be wasteful. Just enough force to shatter their will, to remind them of their place. A calculated strike. A surgical removal of the problem. The Union fleet, a detachment of cruisers and destroyers led by the venerable battlecruiser Pax Unionis, arrived in the Xylos system. No ultimatum was issued. No demand for evacuation was made. The order was given, coolly, from Admiral Veltar, a creature of polished scales and ancient lineage, secure in his command center thousands of light-years away. Render the surface uninhabitable. Neutralize all resistance. Secure the mineral sites. Minimum effort, maximum impact. The orbital bombardment lasted 12 hours. Not with weapons of ultimate destruction, but with calculated, sustained fire designed to collapse infrastructure, ignite atmospheres, and bury cities beneath miles of molten rock. Life signs plummeted. The colony defense militia, outmatched and overwhelmed, fought bravely for a time, but their pleas for aid, for intervention from the broader human alliance, went unanswered. The Union jamming array ensured their screams died unheard in the void. One small, civilian freighter, the Stardust Drifter, was outbound when the attack began. It was deemed too insignificant to waste munitions on, a speck of dust that would eventually be swept away by the solar winds of the dying world. Aboard was a scientist, Elara Vance, returning to Earth after years of geological survey work. She watched through polarized viewports as her home, the place where her family lived, was systematically erased. Her communication attempts were futile. Her distress signal was lost. The Stardust Drifter, on emergency power and rerouting across several unsecured jump points, became a ghost ship, carrying a single, horrified witness and a complete, unfiltered recording of the 12-hour atrocity. When the Stardust Drifter, battered and silent, finally limped into the Sol system months later, the galaxy had already moved on. The Union had issued a brief, sterile statement about suppressing piracy and renegade elements in the Xylos system. The galactic news cycles, dominated by Union-controlled media, barely noted the blip. Other species, wary of Union power, offered pro forma condolences or remained silent. Humanity was expected to mourn, perhaps protest futilely, and then fade back into obscurity, a lesson learned. What the galaxy did not see, could not comprehend, was the silence that fell over Earth and her remaining colonies. It was not the silence of defeat, but the stunned hush that precedes an earthquake. The broadcast of Elara Vance's recording was not a call to arms, but a simple, unedited truth. It played on every channel, every network, every personal device. 12 hours of fire and death, witnessed by one terrified soul. Grief was a tidal wave, but it was swiftly followed by something harder, colder. Rage settled deep, replacing the initial shock with a focused, brittle resolve. Borders dissolved. Old rivalries between nations, between orbital habitats and planetary settlements, became irrelevant. There were no longer factions of humanity. There was only humanity, unified by a shared wound, a shared memory. From the ashes of Xylos rose a single, unshakable vow, whispered at first, then spoken aloud, and finally, etched into the core of every human being: never again. The Galactic Union expected protests. They expected diplomatic appeals, sanctions, perhaps even a futile, scattered military response they could easily crush. They prepared their statements, their fleets arrayed in defensive postures around key systems, confident in their overwhelming power and the knowledge that humanity was fragmented and technologically backward compared to their own millenniums of development. Instead, humanity disappeared. Their public transmission ceased. Trade routes that led to human space went dark. Diplomatic embassies were abandoned, not with fanfare, but with a chilling, quiet finality. Earth became a ghost world to the galaxy, ringed by automated defense platforms that responded to incursions with cold, mechanical efficiency, but offered no explanation, no communication. It was speculated that humanity had retreated, fractured under the pressure, perhaps even collapsed. The Union declared the human problem solved itself. They were dismissed, forgotten. Years passed. 5 years. 10. 20. Beneath the veil of silence, humanity did not collapse. They transformed. The collective grief and rage became a furnace, forging a new society defined by a singular, relentless purpose: the fulfillment of the vow. Every resource, every mind, every ounce of will was directed towards one goal: to ensure that no power, not the Galactic Union, nor any other force in the cosmos, could ever inflict such suffering upon them again. Scientists who had once pursued theoretical physics or bioengineering were redirected to materials science and quantum mechanics, driven by a desperate need to understand the fundamental forces that governed the universe, to bend them to their will. Shipyards, once dedicated to exploration and trade, were converted into vast, hidden construction sites, burrowing deep into planetary crusts or nestled within nebulae, cloaked from any sensor sweep. The old, inefficient structures of governance were streamlined, replaced by a system built for speed, coordination, and absolute discretion. They delved into forgotten archives, whispers of ancient technologies dismissed as myth by the Union's comfortable science. They found hints, fragments, echoes of power the galaxy had decided was too dangerous, too unstable, too wrong to wield. They didn't care. They reverse-engineered Union technology captured from opportunistic raids or recovered from failed incursions, dissecting every energy signature, every shielding frequency, every weapon system. They didn't just build ships. They built instruments of judgment. They didn't just develop weapons. They unlocked principles that twisted reality, that nullified defenses, that erased targets not just from existence, but from the very fabric of spacetime. They called some of these projects by names that echoed their purpose: Solace, a network AI capable of processing tactical scenarios on a scale no organic mind could grasp; Nemesis, a power source that drew energy from vacuum fluctuations; Gatesong, a weapon capable of manipulating gravitational constants. These were not mere machines, they were born of trauma, shaped by silent fury. Admiral Anya Sharma, the officer who received a Lara Vance when the Stardust Drifter arrived, became the face of this silent transformation, though her face was rarely seen by those outside the inner circles of the new command. She had lost a sister on Xylos. Her grief was a cold stone in her gut, her rage a clear, unwavering flame. She was not a politician or a philosopher. She was an engineer of retribution, a strategist who understood that true power was not about brute force, but about control, precision, and the absolute negation of the enemy's will. 20 years. For 20 years, the galaxy forgot about humanity. They were a footnote, a cautionary tale told to disobedient children about the dangers of settling unprotected space. The Union grew complacent, their dominance unchallenged. Their bureaucracy expanded, their military became fat and slow, focused on parades and internal policing rather than genuine threats. Then, a Union survey fleet investigating anomalies near the Orion Spur, far from known human space, detected a massive energy signature. It appeared for less than a microsecond, a ripple in the gravitational field that shouldn't have been possible. They reported it as a sensor malfunction. A week later, a Union battle group guarding a vital hyperspace junction at the edge of the former human sphere of influence received a single, encrypted transmission. It contained only the 12-hour recording of the Xylos bombardment, loop after loop. Before they could even file a report, the junction collapsed. Not exploded, but collapsed. The battle group was caught in the ensuing gravitational singularity, compressed into a point source and gone. The Union command structure sputtered in disbelief. Sabotage. An unprecedented natural phenomenon. Then, they appeared. They didn't mass on the Union borders. They didn't send declarations of war. They simply arrived. The first target was Cygnus X-1, a Union deep space fortress that controlled access to several rich sectors. It was considered impregnable, protected by layers of shields, sensor arrays, and a fleet garrison numbered in the thousands. Union sensors detected energy signatures unlike anything in their database. They weren't hyperspace jumps. They were localized distortions, like wrinkles appearing in the fabric of reality. And through these distortions, ships emerged. Not hundreds. Not thousands. Dozens, perhaps 100 at most. Their design was stark, utilitarian, terrifyingly efficient. Dark, angular hulls that seemed to absorb light, bristling with weapon emplacements that pulsed with contained power. At the heart of the formation was a vessel that dwarfed even the Union's largest dreadnoughts. It was kilometers long, a mobile mountain of purpose, its surface scarred but smooth, silent and menacing. This was the flagship. This was the Remembrancer. Admiral Veltar, now a High Admiral, was stationed at Cygnus X-1. He watched in disbelief as the human fleet, this ghost from the past, ignored their hails, ignored their warning shots. The fortress opened fire, unleashing torrents of plasma and kinetic rounds. The human ships didn't evade. Their shields, shimmering into existence, didn't just deflect the incoming fire, they seemed to absorb it, feeding the energy into their own systems. Then, the Remembrancer's primary weapon spoke. Not with a beam, or a missile, or a wave of energy. It was a sound, or perhaps the absence of sound that felt like a sound, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated not just through the vacuum, but through the very bones of the Union crews. Then, parts of the fortress began to simply disappear. Not explode. Not vaporize. They were erased. A section of the outer hull, then a weapon battery, then an entire command spire. One moment they existed, solid and real, the next they were gone, leaving behind only a clean, unnatural void, like a glitch in reality. This was the effect of the gate song, a weapon that manipulated localized gravitational constants to such an extreme degree that the affected matter was simply unmade. Panic erupted across Union channels. This wasn't warfare they understood. This was existential horror. The human ships moved with a cold, precise ballet, ignoring the smaller targets, focusing their terrifying firepower on the key nodes of the fortress defenses and fleet command ships. Their smaller vessels, nimble and fast, phased through Union formations, their weapons leaving behind trails of shattered, inert hulls. Within an hour, Cygnus X-1 was crippled, its defenses gone, its fleet scattered or destroyed. The human fleet didn't linger to occupy. They didn't gloat. They simply transitioned out using the same reality-bending method they arrived with, leaving behind a tomb of twisted metal and a galaxy starting to understand the chilling, terrifying reality of its mistake. The first shockwave had hit. The silence was over. The re-emergence was not a declaration of war, it was a statement of fact, brutally delivered. The Galactic Union, for generations the undisputed power, found itself facing an enemy it had not only underestimated but actively forgotten. Their initial responses were chaotic, born of disbelief and arrogance. They scrambled fleets, reinforced key systems, and issued pompous condemnations. It was like trying to swat gnats with battleships. Humanity's campaign of retribution was systematic, cold, and terrifyingly efficient. They did not strike randomly. They moved with the precision of a surgeon dissecting a diseased organism. Each target was chosen for its strategic importance, its symbolic value, or its direct connection to the Xylo's atrocity. Sector Command Gamma, responsible for approving the Xylo's operation, vanished in a ripple of gate song. The shipyards of Cthar, built the Pax Unionis. Reduced to stellar dust by automated drones that phased through defenses and detonated precisely calculated charges within the orbital platforms. Union Communication Hub Prime, the heart of their network. Seized not by brute force, but by Solace, the AI, which infiltrated their systems through quantum entanglement, turning their own network against them, broadcasting messages of doom and, most chillingly, the raw, unedited Xylos recording onto every frequency, every screen in Union space. Psychological warfare became a key weapon. The Union leadership, already reeling from their military losses, found their populations exposed to the truth of their regime's cruelty, undermining morale and sparking dissent. Their ships, once symbols of unquestioned power, were now fragile against the human capabilities. Union shielding, built to withstand energy and kinetics, was useless against weapons that manipulated causality or entropy. Their targeting systems struggled to track ships that could phase in and out of normal space. Their numbers, their vast fleets, meant little when humanity could dictate the terms of engagement, striking where and when they chose, often deep behind enemy lines, sowing panic and forcing the Union to scatter their forces thinly. Admiral Sharma, aboard the Remembrancer, oversaw the campaign with a quiet intensity. She rarely gave rousing speeches. Her commands were crisp, direct, and absolute. Her officers, figures like Commander Harrow, a former colony defense soldier whose family had died on Xylos, and Jericho, a brilliant, ruthless tactician forged in the silent years, executed her orders with unwavering loyalty. They had seen the recordings. They remembered. The Union, desperate, began to employ tactics they had long forbidden. They unleashed ancient superweapons, powerful but unstable devices designed for world-breaking. Humanity seemed to anticipate every move. A Union fleet attempting to deploy a nullifier device near a human-designated target found their weapon inert, their ships boarded by silent human teams who disabled the device and broadcasted their failure across Union channels. It was revealed humanity had developed countermeasures to many of the Union's supposedly secret projects during their years of silence, studying captured technology and anticipating potential desperate measures. The galaxy watched, stunned and terrified. Neutral systems locked down their borders. Species that had once paid homage to the Union now watched the old power crumble, replaced by a new, silent, and infinitely more frightening force. Rumors spread. The humans were demons forged in grief, unstoppable, seeking total annihilation. The truth was perhaps more complex, but no less terrifying. Humanity was not seeking conquest or territory. They were seeking completion. Each strike felt like an erasure, a balancing of scales dipped in blood 20 years prior. There was no mercy in their actions, but there was a cold, undeniable purpose. They were dismantling the Union apparatus piece by piece, demonstrating the final, fatal consequence of underestimating the quiet ones. And through it all, the galaxy sensed that even now, humanity was not showing its full strength. The true extent of Solace, Nemesis, the capabilities of the Remembrancer and its accompanying fleet, remained shrouded in mystery, adding to the pervasive dread. The collapse of the Galactic Union was swift and brutal once the process began. Faith in their leadership evaporated as fleet after fleet was shattered and core systems fell under human control, not conquered, but incapacitated. Member species, sensing the inevitable, began to secede, attempting to cut their losses, only to find themselves facing the silent judgment of humanity if they had participated in the Xylos atrocity or benefited from it. High Admiral Vel Tar, once the picture of confident authority, was a broken creature. His orders went unheeded, his forces were annihilated, his reputation in tatters. Desperate, he retreated to the Union capital world, Xantis, a gleaming ecumenopolis that had served as the heart of the Union for millennia. He gathered the remnants of the home fleet, activated the planet's layer defense grid, and issued a galaxy-wide plea for aid, a desperate cry to anyone who would listen. None came. The galaxy was frozen in fear, unwilling to draw the attention of the rising power. Humanity came to Xantis not in a massive invasion fleet, but with the core group that had led the campaign, the Remembrancer and a carefully selected formation of ships. They positioned themselves in orbit, silent, their dark hulls absorbing the light of Xantis's sun. The Union home fleet, despite its size, felt impossibly small and vulnerable. A transmission was sent from the Remembrancer. Not to High Admiral Tar, but to the entire population of Xantis, broadcast on every frequency, every channel. It was Admiral Sharma's voice, calm, clear, devoid of emotion. 20 years ago, she began, her voice resonating across the planet, into every home, every bunker. You destroyed our home on Xylos Prime. You killed our families. You thought us weak. You thought we would forget. The Xylos recording played again, 12 hours of terror projected onto the sky above Xantis, a constant, horrifying reminder. We did not forget, Sharma continued. We remembered. Every scream. Every dying breath. Every moment of your arrogance. High Admiral Tar, trembling in his command center, ordered the home fleet to fire. The Union ships unleashed everything they had. Shields flared, weapon lances screamed across the void. The Remembrancer's shield shimmered, absorbing the onslaught. The human ships didn't return fire. They held position, weathering the storm, demonstrating the utter futility of resistance. You relied on your power, Sharma's voice continued, steady and cold. You believed your position was eternal. You were wrong. Then, a single, targeted pulse of energy lanced out from the Remembrancer. It didn't hit a ship. It struck the planet itself, targeting the central spire of the Grand Council building, the symbol of Union authority. The building didn't explode, it was meticulously, surgically dismantled by a localized, gate-song effect, collapsing in on itself piece by piece until only a crater remained, a precise, horrifying wound on the planet's surface. Sharma's voice returned. This is not annihilation. This is a demonstration. The power you abused. We now hold. We chose this target, this method, because it was your arrogance, your centers of power, that allowed Xylos to happen. Your fleets are crippled. Your network is ours. Your authority is gone. The Union home fleet ceased firing. Their energy reserves were depleted, their will broken. They had thrown everything they had at the silent, dark ships, and had not even scratched them. They were defeated utterly, not by being destroyed, but by being shown the vast, unbridgeable gulf between their power and humanity's. Remember Xylos, Admiral Sharma concluded. Remember what you did. And remember this day. There will not be a third chance. The human fleet, the Remembrancer at its head, turned and left Xantis. They did not land occupation forces. They did not install a new government. They left the remnants of the Union to pick through the rubble of their broken empire, the recording of Xylos still playing on repeat across the planet's shattered network. The galaxy, witnessing the fall of the Union, reeled. The power vacuum was immense, but the terror of filling it was greater. Humanity had not conquered, but they had irrevocably shifted the balance of power. They were the new, silent hegemon, their dominance built not on vast fleets spread thin across the stars, but on the demonstrated capability to strike anywhere, at any time, with unimaginable force, leaving nothing but silence and the echoes of past atrocities. In the wake of the Union's collapse, chaos erupted in some sectors. Freed from Union control, oppressed species rose up against their former overseers. Others, wary of the new human power, formed defensive pacts. Humanity, for the most part, remained aloof, observing from a distance, occasionally intervening with swift, decisive force if a system with ties to the Xylos atrocity attempted to reassert itself or if their own interests were directly threatened. Their borders remained sealed, protected by invisible sentinels and the reputation they had earned. But within human space, the silence was beginning to strain. The singular purpose that had unified them for 20 years was fulfilled. The union was broken. Justice, or vengeance, had been served. Now, questions began to surface. Admiral Sharma, aboard the Remembrancer, felt the weight of it. They had achieved the impossible. They had ensured never again. But at what cost? The society they had built was a machine of war and remembrance. Could it adapt to peace? Could they shed the cold ruthlessness that had been their salvation? Commander Harrow, who had seen his share of the Union's cruelty and participated in humanity's devastating response, asked Sharma one day, looking out at the silent, star-strewn void, "Admiral, are we them now?" Sharma was silent for a long moment. "We wield their fate," she finally replied, her voice low. "We hold the power they craved and misused. The difference, Commander, is that we remember why we fought." They forgot who they were fighting against. Not everyone agreed with Sharma's restrained approach at Xantis. A faction led by a hardline strategist named Kalen argued that total annihilation of the Union leadership and military would have been the only true guarantee. They saw the current state as incomplete, a potential breeding ground for future threats. They had tasted the intoxicating rush of power and questioned the wisdom of restraint now. This internal dissent, quiet at first, represented a new potential fracture, a danger born not of external threats, but of their own transformation. New challenges loomed. Remnants of the Union, scattered and desperate, formed pirate fleets. Other, previously neutral powers, armed themselves, wary of humanity's intentions. And the ancient powers, the entities and civilizations that had withdrawn from galactic affairs eons ago, stirred in their slumber, sensing the shift in cosmic power, watching the rise of a species that dared to wield forces they themselves had deemed too dangerous. The galaxy was now defined by a new, fragile status quo. Humanity was the apex predator, feared and respected in equal measure. Their ships, silent and powerful, were a constant reminder of the cost of arrogance. The Remembrancer remained the symbol of their power, a dark star in the consciousness of the galaxy, representing both the vengeance delivered and the potential for future judgment. Humanity's new role was ambiguous. They were not benevolent protectors, nor were they overt conquerors. They were a warning. A scar etched onto the face of the galaxy. Their message was clear, unspoken, but felt by every sentient species: remember Xylos. Remember the silence that followed. And remember what happened when the quiet ones decided to remind you. Peace, if it could be called that, was not a state of harmony, but a tense, watchful quiet. The cycle of conflict had been broken, not by reconciliation, but by the overwhelming dominance of a new power forged in the fires of past injustice. The question lingered, hanging in the void like the silent presence of the Remembrancer: had humanity achieved justice, or had they merely become the next turn of the wheel, waiting for the cycle to begin anew? The memory of Xylos remained their guide, their burden, and perhaps, their only hope of not repeating the mistakes of those they had judged. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what a species burdened by such terrible memory and wielding such terrible power would do next.